Welcome to the Football Guys Dynasty Show. I'm Chad Parsons, and Jameis Winston is one of the biggest superflex buys in all of Dynasty. A lot of people, I think, are going to look and see what the short-term ramifications are this season. They're going to see that he had to bail. He basically had to tuck his tail between his legs, go on a one-year deal. But we're seeing quarterbacks do that across the board this offseason. There's not enough jobs for a lot of talent. So he goes to the Saints. We saw what happened with Teddy Bridgewater going there, and now he's born again. He's an NFL starter there, and with new life, a multi-year contract, and potentially someone that can improve that Bears team. But I think it's a chance to learn. I mean, going behind Drew Brees, Taysom Hill is right under that wing, nice firmly under that warm wing of Drew Brees, Sean Payton, the weapons, the optimization. So I love this because we talked about Ryan Tannehill being one of our favorite guys in 2019. And a big reason was, now part of Tannehill was he was behind an unsettled starter. And the perfect storm occurred. Mariota didn't work out. Tannehill gets red hot, makes a run, and now he's the starter for that team. But I think even before we get into some of the data behind this, the fit and Dynasty is about the long term. You have to think beyond 2020 with some of these buy players and value propositions. And Jameis Winston is a huge one historically, and we're going to get into that.
Yeah, so I'm interested to see where you go, where you sort of go from here on Jameis. I'm Jordan McNamara. Just jumping right into this, I looked up my data, and going back basically between 2000 and 2014, the top 10 quarterbacks that hit for 2 or more top 12 seasons. So top 10 in the NFL draft hit for 2, I call it a double hit rate. So 2 top 12 seasons, they average 5.8 top 12 seasons in their career. So he is on the right side of that line, and would be, for historically, it would be very, very rare for him to get to this point and not do it again. And so he has that double hit, which is a big deal in terms of not a one hit wonder. You have some huge statistical seasons, a lot of interceptions, but huge historical seasons, and prime fantasy success. So for him to just trail off, that would be a really rare occurrence.
Yeah, I got 20 in my sample size going back to the mid 90s. And pretty much I went back to 2000, but players like Peyton Manning that were already going for maybe 2-3 seasons, I finished that out, make sure that they're in the sample size. I found 20 quarterbacks that had at least a top 6 season, check for Jameis Winston, and at least another quarterback 1 season. So lower quarterback 1. Winston has both of those. He's also got a QB 14, a couple more in the top 24. The point is, Winston has been highly productive. And out of the 20 that have played at least 5 seasons, and Winston right now has completed 5, the one guy that didn't produce another top 6, Mr. Jay Cutler, who is kind of a tagline, kind of a punchline, but he was big, talented, and we saw that bad decisions. He actually morphed in the second half of his career into a QB2, ended up, just kind of fizzling out, shorter than a lot of the quarterbacks on this list. But you look at the current quarterbacks that were similar to Jameis Winston through 4 or 5 seasons, you get guys like Ben Roethlisberger, Phillip Rivers, maybe slightly better in terms of early on. Pretty similar, Matt Ryan. But the point is, all of these guys, except for Jay Cutler, put up another top 6 season. And the average was 4, and he's at 1. So I think this, you want to go just total drumbeat, he can now see, right? A lot of the dialogue. Jameis Winston, can you imagine playing professional quarterback, throwing for 5,000 yards, 30 plus touchdowns, being a top 5 quarterback 1 season, QB 10 or so another season, early on, the number 1 overall draft pick, and finally now you can see. I have a sidebar, quick 2-second thing, Jordan, is that I swear by these certain sunglasses. I know they have, you play golf, I play tennis as our sort of our things. You bike it, we both bike as well. But that I have these sunglasses that they say they have golf versions too, but you can see the ball better. And Jordan, I swear I can. And so I swear I've played without it and I've played with them. And I'm not going to use other sunglasses ever again. They have a certain tinting. It highlights the ball. And so I buy it. Better vision. I can only imagine going out there with 2060, 2080, whatever it is. He's squinting to see the scoreboard. yet he can do all these things. So I'm excited from a personal front of you can see again or see for the first time. That is just again, the low-hanging fruit, I think, here of saying Jameis Winston, imagine him getting all this tutelage. And again, we're talking about some of the data behind this, but also the fact that he can finally see. And I know it's a punchline, it's a joke, it's a social media easy thing to share and kind of poke fun of, but I think it's a legitimate hindrance that now he should not have.
Post-merger, there's only been 12 quarterback seasons. So going back to 1970, where you've had 5,000 yards. Peyton Manning, Mahomes, Marino, Breeze a couple of times, Stafford, Breeze actually 5 times, Stafford, Brady, Roethlisberger, Jameis Winston. So the idea that he is not the idea that this is the end for him as a starting quarterback just seems odd. I'm wondering your thoughts on, we get back Breeze for, he signs basically a multi-year deal. It's basically going year to year at this point where he is age-wise. I'm curious your thoughts on the 1-year deal. What odds would you put on that he's a 2021 starter, and unpack that a little bit, that he's with the Saints?
Yeah, I would put it. You mean Jameis Winston being with the Saints?
Jameis Winston, yeah.
I think there's a greater than 25% chance that he is the 2021 or 2022 starter. And this is valuable. I mean, people have been vice gripping Taysom Hill in Dynasty. Why? On the prospect that he could be a running dynamic quarterback, albeit that's thrown very little passes in the NFL. He was not durable in college. They've really used him minimally in the NFL, very specifically to maximize his efforts. But the fact that people are holding on to Taysom Hill like that, and yet Jameis Winston, I'll get to it in a minute, but what he's going for in Superflex, he is a go explore this in every single one of your Dynasty Superflex leagues. Once you hear this, actually, while you're watching and listening to the show, this is what you should also be doing, multitasking. I wanted to get into the interception rate because I think that's a fascinating thing coming from Jameis Winston. And I track it a little differently than other folks do, because I say you can't throw an interception if it's complete. So I look at the interception rate for incompletions, and he had a 12% interception rate. Over 9.5% is like a 90-something% regression rate to the following year. And here's the other part. In 2019, Winston was way above. He was 50% higher. He has an 8% interception rate for his career. Jameis Winston, who all he does is throw picks, right? That's all his dialogue is. So even he was 50% over his previous career average in 2019. It was an outlier season in every regard. So I'm not saying he's going to go down to 8 picks. But what I'm saying is if he gets it down to where he was previously, he was 11 to 18 every other year. He's going to be fine. He's going to be starting. Matt Stafford has thrown a lot of picks. We've seen Phillip Rivers throw a lot of picks. There are plenty of quarterbacks that have had 15, 20 interception seasons. Because it got to 30, that's the big thing that I think is saying that Jameis Winston is not overly good. I just want to finish it off with an action plan, which is, what does he actually go for? So actual in Dynasty leagues, super flex only. That's where I'm talking about. You can get him for a lot cheaper than this in a start one. How about getting something on the side in addition to Jameis Winston for Dwayne Haskins? I don't know about you, Jordan, but your spidey senses go up with Dwayne Haskins, where you go, the likelihood of him having a season that we've already seen from Jameis Winston is really low. So, and he wasn't drafted 1 overall. He wasn't even drafted in the top 10. A lot of people thought the Redskins reached in the middle of the first round. So you're getting something on top. I would do that straight up. I would put a little small piece onto Dwayne Haskins. I will wait on Jameis Winston. Here's another one. Paris Campbell in a third. This is super flex for Jameis Winston. How about Gardner Minshew? You want to talk about no allegiance and what's the likelihood he's a 2021 starter? For Jameis Winston, straight up super flex. So these are some examples. Again, I wouldn't say this if you got to go spend 104 in a rookie draft, super flex, to trade that for Jameis Winston. I wouldn't even bring him up. He wouldn't have been the focal point of the show. And I do want to mention that also, Jordan, your Dynasty rankings are up at Footballguys. So people can check those out. Dynasty rankings have been updated. And specifically, this is going to be a quarterback-centric show, because we have had a lot of dialogue about Dak Prescott, and you are the highest out there on the on the rankings in Dynasty in general, but also within the Footballguys ranking staff. So unpack Dak Prescott a little bit, and we're going to be referencing a lot of historical data points and sort of the profiles that endure going forward. And Dak Prescott, even before he got CeeDee Lamb, was already on that track.
Yeah, talk about a team that led the NFL in yardage last year, and it just does not seem like anyone respects it, which is odd. Baltimore was the big story. Lamar Jackson was the big story. From a total offense perspective, Dallas was the best offense in football, just in terms of yardage last year. And some fluky things happened with scoring, and there wasn't a big touchdown rate. And I think a lot of how we look at players and how Dynasty looks at players in particular, you get a lot of it is based on last year's points, and a lot of last year's points at quarterback is based on touchdown rate. You look at Dak Prescott last year, 5% of his passes went for touchdowns. That's around the average. The average about between 4.5 and 5 historically. So that's basically he did that in a normal setting. He finished as quarterback 2, according to our stats. You can go to footballguys.com, look up all the stats. It's a great resource for if you're trying to do stats or look up any of this stuff. By Footballguys, I went over there, looked at their stats, quarterback 2. So I looked at Lamar Jackson and I said, let's compare the two of them and see. And about 58 or so points difference between the two of them. And so I said, the one thing that I've noticed in my research going back 2 decades, basically to 2000, is that the quarterback 1 finishes a lot of the time with 7, 8, 9% touchdown rate, which is just a huge number. And that number is fluky year over year. So what you'll see is that number historically comes back to the average of around 4.5, 5 the following year. It's not something that quarterbacks control particularly well. And so we have seen that, and it's the greats too. This isn't like a Ryan Tannehill situation. We're talking about Brady, and we're talking about Breeze, and we're talking about Rodgers, right? We're talking about this happening to everyone. And so that's, so what you'll see is on average, you would expect about 12 less touchdowns per year out of them based on where they regress to, which is what you would expect less from when I ran my numbers. That's about less what you would expect for Lamar Jackson. And so I just compared the two of them and just flipped their touchdown rates, just to give you an idea of sort of the difference in what you would expect. If you flipped Dak Prescott's touchdown rate with Lamar Jackson's last year, Dak Prescott would have thrown for 53 touchdowns. He would have outscored Lamar Jackson by 204 points. He would have been the going away 1+ WARP, 1+ win over replacement player, which is basically the true impact, how much a player actually means in terms of winning games over the quarterback 2, which is a massive, massive number. And from that, one spot difference. And so I sort of look at all of that and say, he has basically performed 4 seasons in the top 12. He has 2 top 6 finishes, which my research has found enormous significance in that number. And when you look at it, the offense is only getting better, right? He has Amari Cooper. He has Michael Gallup, who was a sneaky top 24 finisher last year, and he adds in CeeDee Lamb. And you just look at that offense, and you take you take Witten out of it, which I don't think he added a ton in terms of over expectation in terms of his targets, and you plug in CeeDee Lamb into some of those Witten targets and some of those Randall Cobb targets. I mean, that offense is young, and it's got a lot of good pieces, and their defense can struggle at times, and those make for shootouts. So I basically love pretty much everything about Dak Prescott's profile, including his price. I've seen him go up a little bit. I have a pre-draft Superflex tracker in terms of startup picks compared to post-draft. And I've seen him tick up about a half a round in valuation, but still going behind guys like Kyler Murray, which to me, the comparison, and I know you like Kyler Murray, the comparison between the two of them, at least from a historical what success looks like perspective, isn't even a close call in terms of which one's the right bet. So, looking at all those things, I just think that Dak Prescott's on the right side of variance. Lamar Jackson's clearly on the regression side of variance. And 12 months from now, we could be talking a vastly different story about their two 2020 seasons.
Yeah. And another thing I like about Dak Prescott, and to a lesser degree, Jameis Winston, is they run the ball enough. I'm not asking for Lamar Jackson. What I am asking for example, Jameis Winston's averaging about 15 yards per game for his career, 4+ attempts per game. So with Dak Prescott, he's averaging about 300 yards per season. He has 3+ rushing touchdowns every year, averaging 5 per year. And those are huge boosts to a position where you get a certain subset. They pretty much don't run at all. Maybe they have a sporadic touchdown. I almost think, Phillip Rivers, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady does have some panache at the end zone. But in general, there's the haves and have-nots, but then there's this nice meaty middle. There's 2 or 3 guys that run a lot, for example, but then can you just rush a little bit, 10, 15, 20 yards per game? Every once in a while you break one. Every once in a while you score a touchdown. That makes a big difference of 1, 2, 3, 4 points per game at the end of the season versus if you didn't do it at all. So with Dak Prescott, again, he's in that nice middle, that second tier of they score quite a bit. I've said it before, in the red zone, he tucks it and runs on 3rd and 6, inside the red zone, more than I see almost anybody else breaking them down for football guys on a weekly basis doing recaps. So that is a big one for me. And do want to mention, this is Chad Parsons and Jordan McNamara, episode 2 of Football Guys Dynasty Show. And Jordan, another quarterback that you're different on in the rankings comparatively, and you've mentioned him in passing, but let's put a few more points on Mr. Lamar Jackson, who commonly, QB2, maybe QB3, sometimes QB1 for some people, but he is your QB4. So we could say this is quibbling, but when you move them 1-2 spots right at the top, it means if you're in a dynasty startup draft, it means in terms of dynasty trading, you're going to just in general be out on said player because there is enough of a difference.
Yeah, I've in my research and looking at the market this year and Superflex drafts, I think there's a top 4 in terms of first 4 players off the board, and it's a pretty solid tier. And the likelihood that they go in the top 4, that's Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley. And then after that, it's a tier break. For me, I just can't get in on, I can get in on Mahomes there, and that's more of a roster construct. It's a historical perspective, and it's a roster construction thing with him at 101. I can get on board with that argument. The problem I have with Lamar Jackson is I sit here in May and I'm going to take him in the top 4 of a Superflex draft when I know regression's coming, right? I think that is a tough thing to do in terms of that. Right. He was a historic performer last year, and a
game
lot
changer.
A lot of that had to do with touchdown rate. And with when you look at his stats, when you look at all of the ways that he scored, yes, it was rushing, but a significant portion of that was an inflated touchdown rate. So you're looking at 8.9% of his attempts went for touchdowns. You should think closer to half of that in a normal year. And when you sort of bring that number down, that's a big drop on only 400 or so attempts. I mean, that's a big, the passing game is a little bit capped there. And I think to realistically think about that and expecting that to repeat itself, I think one of the traps that we fall into in Dynasty is paying for past performance. We are playing a game of future performance. We are trying to predict the future. We are trying to play a game based on what happens in the future. When you go overboard on paying for what happened last year, which does have a big impact on what the market is in a particular year. There's a lot of correlation between last year's stats. I mean, over half of a player's cost will be just solely determined on the total points that they scored last year. That is a huge amount of their valuation. But I think in a situation like this, when you have an outlier scenario, which you do with this touchdown rate and the historic rushing upside, all of those things, I think you have to be a little bit cautious there. I have seen it more out of Dak Prescott. I'd feel a little bit more comfortable with Lamar Jackson if it wasn't on such high variance, right? If he came from nowhere and basically put up a Dak Prescott type season where it wasn't high variance, it was just very, very good, I'd feel more comfortable. But I just see it just screams high variance. It screams negative regression, something wicked to me. So I'm out on that cost, and I feel more comfortable with both Prescott and Deshaun Watson going forward in terms of looking at their future production compared to Lamar, betting on 2019 repeating itself in 2020 for Lamar Jackson.
Yeah. So you mentioned the high touchdown rate, and here's my list. This spans 12 years. These are some of the biggest names. We've got a couple, outliers that you would not expect. But again, I do it based off completions, but I'm going to do it mainly in a percentage way just to cap it. So going 25% or so over the typical touchdown rate across the NFL. So this is 25% over the high end that is going to regress 94% of the time in the downward direction. And typically it's by about 25 to 30%. Here is the list. And these are some of the biggest names. Ben Roethlisberger, he actually did it he had 32 touchdowns on 400 pass attempts back in 2007. Guess what he did? It went in half the following year. Aaron Rodgers, pretty magical, right? 45 touchdowns to 6 interceptions. He dropped 3%. He's one of the best we've ever seen. Peyton Manning dropped, again, another 2.5%, 3% off of his 55 touchdown season. And again, one of the best passers ever. A lot of these are not going to be names you would associate with the run-centric Lamar Jackson. It was a magical year. No one, but as Jordan said, we're going forward, not looking back, because too much is put on what they just did. Carson Wentz, Nick Foles. Nick Foles was probably the most magical one. 27-2. He drops nearly in half. Carson Wentz, he dropped a full 5%, probably 40% off of his total. Russell Wilson, he dropped 3.5%, 4%. Are you seeing how the total transcendent guys are dropping less than the other outlier types? Patrick Mahomes, remember, no one could touch him, right? 50 touchdowns coming out of the blocks, 5,000 yards. He dropped from 13% to 8%, and that just lopped off. He was human last year, Jordan. I mean, do you remember that? He was very good, but somehow dropping from 50 is almost a given. So Lamar Jackson is here. He threw 400 passes, as you mentioned, 36 touchdowns. This could easily fall into the mid-20s. Easily. Even if his volume goes up. So he's sitting here. He's actually a higher touchdown rate than any of the guys I just mentioned. Any of them. So you don't think he's going to fall? He was also one of the lower or right in line interception rate. So interceptions up. You get touchdowns down. And here's another thing. He's 210, 215 pounds. Do we honestly think running around as much as he does, he took some shots? And so I don't want to, predict durability issues, but the fact is he's running like a runner. Is he dynamic? Absolutely. Can he elude defenders like a running back? Absolutely. The point is he's going to be put more in harm's way. You're protected in today's NFL in the pocket. Where are you not protected? The moment you turn into a runner. We've heard that phrase echoed before by officials. We've heard it before in a lot of dialogue. And Lamar Jackson being a runner at that side, he is not a tank like Cam Newton. And Cam Newton survived for a long time doing running back like and tank like things. Lamar Jackson is not Cam Newton. He is 210, 215 pounds. And Jordan, we're not too far off from that frame. That would frighten me. Now we are not dynamic, but the point is he is not prototypical running back size, and he's out there for a number of in the line of fire situations that, again, we saw RG3 that didn't work out. He is far more agile than RG3. The point is, though, you start blending the line of quarterback and running back, And there is additional risk where, again, we're grazing face masks, we're turning into protecting the quarterback at all costs, low, high, maybe right around the numbers. We're going to start protecting quarterbacks, but we're not there outside the pocket, and that's where Lamar Jackson makes his biggest impact.
Yeah, I don't know about you. I'm exceedingly fragile. I couldn't take the beating. But the one thing I did look up too is the guys that were way outside the realm. So basically above 7.05% is 2 standard deviations above what you would expect the in terms of quarterback touchdown rate. So that's just call that huge outliers. That's 2.5% or so of the quarterback seasons are out there. So really, really outlier seasons. There's been 11 of them in the past. Go back to 2000. 7 of those guys, 7 of them were quarterback ones, right? That has nothing to do with volume, nothing else other than it's a massive touchdown season, and 7 of that 11 were quarterback ones. So just betting on those types of seasons, and Lamar Jackson was at the far outreaches of that number. So expecting that is just, I think that's a classic. Don't bet on that happening again. And if you're paying quarterback 2 for him right now, there's very little upside in that. There's just very, very little upside in that. And I think a lot of downside.
Never miss a moment of the Football Guys show content by subscribing to Football Guys TV on YouTube. You can subscribe, rate, and review the Football Guys channel on all your podcasting platforms, and sign up for the Football Guys daily email update delivered by Joe Bryant from your daily guide to all your news and instant analysis. You can get that, again, free. And ironically, we got the link is footballguys.com/free. Now, Jordan, the other quarterback we're going to talk and feature this week is Mr. Aaron Rodgers. You are notably the highest ranker on Aaron Rodgers, where they just drafted Jordan Love. Everyone wants to say that Aaron Rodgers is now on an extreme time clock, not only with the Green Bay Packers, but also in the NFL. That erosion is near, and you are going in to that said risk that is out there in the Dynasty population, which is causing him to fall precipitously in Dynasty startup drafts this offseason.
Yeah, I was disappointed they didn't go with some skill position to help him out, and instead they went with
they did.
Sorry, a non-quarterback skill position in the first round. I was hoping for a Jalen Reagor, Justin Jefferson type in that range. They came back with AJ Dillon, who we could have a whole different conversation about, and Joseph Degar in the 3rd round, but no running mate for Devontae Adams. That said, I mean, when you look at guys that have done it at quarterback, the best bet is to bet they're going to do it again. And so when you look at these guys in terms of age, doesn't scare me in the mid 30s. And that's one thing my research has found more and more, is that when you get into that range at quarterbacks, the guys that get to play in that range and keep playing, it's doesn't really drop their production all that much in terms of fantasy. But what you see is it actually drops, it whittles away who survives in that. It's more of a selection bias type thing where guys stop playing at that age, not the guys that continue playing continue to produce and continue to play. But you're seeing him behind. You're seeing him behind guys like Tua, behind guys like Daniel Jones. He's going behind. He dropped a half a round in valuation since the NFL draft. So we're talking in 10 days or so, he's down a half a round in valuation. He's going behind guys like Joe Burrow. There's what I think that the dynasty market in general fails to account for in terms of these quarterbacks is how many of them miss. And you can expect, we talked about that double hit rate for guys in the top 10 of the NFL draft. So you're talking the elite of the elite in terms of quarterbacks. 4 in 10 of them hit twice for a top 12 season. And that's not a huge threshold, right? That when we think about long-term dynasty, hitting twice for a top 12 season isn't a huge threshold. 4 out of 10 of them hit. Put another way, 6 out of 10 of them don't. And so when you look at quarterbacks in particular, guys that are on the right side of doing that in their career already have a high rate of doing it again. And guys that aren't, there's so much risk in doing that. And in Superflex, especially in a startup draft, the one thing you can't do is whiff at quarterback early, and that really influences my rankings. I don't want to miss.
Well, that works with Aaron Rodgers because you don't have to go super early and you are reducing your risk.
Yes. And that's the beauty of sort of the strategy, is that the teens in drafts this year is actually where the value is, because you're avoiding situations like you and I both like Baker Mayfield, but there's a lot of risk there in terms of him going from year 3 to year 4. If he doesn't hit, he's standing on the cliff in terms of historical guys that have hit after year 3 and haven't hit, that don't
played. It's not that they've sat, I mean, Tony Romo, for example, he sat for 3 years. We've got Aaron Rodgers. He sat for 3 years, and playing is actually a detriment to start. Because, Kirk Cousins, right? He sparsely played, but now he's the starter, and now you see him logging those consistency numbers year over year. So he is playing and on the wrong side, as you said, of hitting thresholds that actually insulate you for future production. Yeah.
And so when you look at, when you compare him to Baker Mayfield, like, this is a critical year for Baker Mayfield in terms of starts, in terms of the NFL starts that you get for a quarterback that hasn't hit. He's brushing up against it. It's year 3, but he is getting close to that number. So if he doesn't hit, you would expect that there's a reasonable possibility going into year 4 that he's on a very short leash, if not added competition. And so I don't want to do that dance in Superflex. So give me the guy that I think has a long-term role. He's locked into contract. I know they did the Jordan Love thing. It doesn't really concern me over the next 2 or 3 years. And let's take that safety at a discount. I mean, that's a win-win.
They would take a nuclear hit if he is not on the team for the next 2 seasons. And here's the other thing: if he's not on the team after the next 2 seasons, look at Tom Brady, right? He's going to another situation. It could be better. We might be seeing Drew Brees potentially. I mean, we think he's going to retire. What if the Saints want to move on? What if they got Jameis Winston for 2/3 of the money, that they have to pay Drew Brees, and he's 14 years younger or ish. So they may choose to move on. The Patriots chose to move on in some capacity by not bringing him back. So there's a lot of things at play to say, even if he does move on at 38 years old, he's an all-timer. He's played 12 seasons when you take out the first 3 that he sat behind Brett Favre. He's been a top 6 in 7 of the 12 seasons. He's been a top 12 another 3 seasons. Only 2 seasons has he been outside even the top 10. And we want to banish that to the mid rounds of Superflex startups, which is just baffling to me. Like Aaron Rodgers, 2-3 years ago, he was way up there. And now he's not so much. And now I'm so in. I used to be sucked into those alluring young quarterbacks, and now the steady Eddies, those Kirk Cousins, the Matt Staffords, Aaron Rodgers, digging those guys. Give me the guys that people think are going to retire in the next 2 years. I love those.
Sometimes it doesn't have to be hard, right? Like sometimes it is that easy. Just
take one of the best players at the position we've seen in our lifetime. Done and done.
Just bet on that guy.
Yeah. Exactly. This is Chad Parsons and Jordan McNamara with episode 2 of Footballguys Dynasty Show. And let's talk some Dynasty trades to finish this out, because started, again, you can go over to the Shark Pool, which is a free message board. You can sign up and interact. They actually have a thriving Dynasty trade. You go in there, you can put your Dynasty trades, but also for this show, if you want to hear your trade discussed on air every single week, you can submit for our show. So it's Footballguys Dynasty Show, Dynasty Trade of the Week. So we like to talk strategy, but also a real context about trades that have been executed in your Dynasty leagues. So I wanted to discuss one because it's rookie draft season. So why don't we start talking about trading future picks for current year picks, Jordan? So we love rookie picks. So let's just get that out in the open. We're making a statement here. So this is someone trading away in a 12-team shallow roster. So that is applicable here. They are in a rebuilding situation, which means not likely to contend in 2020. Stranger things have happened. You'll be open to that, but they are solid at wide receiver, not so much at running back. 18-man rosters, but they do have a robust taxi squad to help. They traded their first-round pick, second-round pick, and 207 this year, Jordan, for 103. So they still have a first that looks likely early next year. But we generally are not proponents of trading future picks. However, let's put a little asterisk on this trade because you're trading a first and a second, as well as a later second this year, not super flex, and you're getting 103, one of the blue chip profiles this year.
Yeah, as a general rule, I don't like to trade future picks. I think if you're going to do that, and this owner also has 101 this year. So I think you have to, there's a landmine there for me in terms of don't step on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I think that's the key to that dance at 101 and 103 is don't step on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And if you sort of go with any, Jonathan Taylor would be my 101, and then take whoever you feel with comfortable at 103. Dobbins, Akers, and Swift all have interesting. I don't have a strong take. I don't think you have to. Basically, my decision there is not Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So for me, I don't. Historically, I don't like this type of trade, but into this class, getting up this high, I don't mind it. And he has a couple of other picks, and that short roster size too. I mean, there can be a lot of turnover year over year in terms of going from bad to good, because you have it's a shorter roster. You have a little bit more variance. So I typically don't like this deal, but if you're going to make this deal, make it like this, where you get a premium asset.
Yeah, and I think this is the year to do it because 2021, especially at running back, doesn't look the same. We are projecting ahead. Things are going to happen over the next 12 months. Heck, a lot of things are going to happen in our world over the next 12 months. But you have 101, you have 103, you got 107. You can get a cornerstone wide receiver also there. And one thing I wanted to hit on just with this format. So you got 18-man active, 10-man taxi. So a robust taxi squad, but generally how it works is taxi squad is for rookies only, or you can basically leave them there until you activate. And just to mention an ancillary strategy here, that be sure, here's my rule of thumb. I like to put players I know I'm going to keep on the taxi squad. So that would include the 101 coming up this year, the 103, the 107. And I wait. I do not activate said player until, for my team specifically, they are an auto start. Either they are so overwhelmingly so, I will start them starting now for the foreseeable future based on the information I have. Whether that's an injury, a lot of times rookies can be slow starters, even if we think they're going to be great players. Look at Nick Chubb. It was till mid-season, and then he all of a sudden started to get a strong workload, and that was basically all she wrote in terms of Carlos Hyde on that team. So until they become an auto start, leave them, because guess what? If you're 1-5 this year, do you really want to activate that running back? There's not really a reason, because are you really going to turn the corner? So be specific. So I wait. I put the players that I most want to keep long-term on the taxi squad. When I get to the point where they're undeniable starters for my team, whether it's via injury or strong play from them, then I activate them. And you know what? If you have to cut a player at that point, that's not a bad thing, because that means I have a cornerstone, strong producer, pipeline player coming from my taxi squad to my active squad because they're so good. That's not a bad situation for you. You shouldn't regret cutting your 18th player or trying to trade them before you activate them that week. That is a good scenario for your team, even if you kind of view it as a forced scenario. Well, I should have just had my 101 or 103 this year on my active squad, especially when you have this type of setting. I think that's very important for folks to utilize and optimize your taxi squad correctly.
Yeah, one other thing with that trade too, it looks like he owns two future firsts. In that type of trade, I would rather keep my own future first and trade away the other one, because it protects your floor. So that way, if things go poorly for you, you get a high pick. If things go well, right, you get a later pick, but you can that's a good thing, right? So
exactly, you'd love to have 112 every year, right, Jordan? Because
I'll deal with that.
Doing well,
right? Yeah, and so you don't want to. Whereas if you finish last in the league, and the other person finishes at 112, right? That's a tough pill to swallow. So give the other person's pick, keep your own. And well, that type of situation.
As you mentioned, insulating the floor, because here's worse than finishing at a lousy spot in your league this year, because you're trying to do well. And guess what? It goes sideways. Injuries. You starting all the wrong players at all the wrong times. We've been there on a barrage of factors that go into it. It doesn't mean you're a horrible dynasty owner. Things can go sideways on you in one season. But even worse is when you creep closer to the end of that year with things not going well and you go, oh yeah, I forgot. I do not have my own first next year, and it would have been 101, 103, whatever it is. I don't have it. One of my league mates does, and I'm going to have to they're going to be able to hang that over my head going forward. And probably you traded that pick for not full value by the time you get all the way there, and it is 103. And now you don't even have it as solace. Because again, you get all the way there and you're like, man, I stunk this year. But you know what? The hope and optimism of a high first round rookie pick, and frankly, a high pick in every round, that's supposed to be an advantage. That's supposed to help you. And now you don't have it to help you. Let's go over one more, Jordan, here to close out the show. And it's another rookie pick. Again, that is what May is typically about in dynasty leagues. It's talking rookies. It's talking about rookie draft strategy. And this is 101, the glorious 101 this year. You mentioned offhand is for you, it is Jonathan Taylor. It is for me as well. They are rebuilding, and I think an interesting scenario. So he said, it's my only rookie pick. He's very weak at running back. He's got some promising pieces there at wide receiver. 12-team stock PPR. So that's one PPR when I say stock. Traded 101 for 108, 203, and 301. Be kind, Jordan.
Give me 101 here. The problem I have with a trade, like, I don't want to give up this level of elite player, and you're getting a top 2-round startup pick in terms of valuation with either Jonathan Taylor or Clyde Edwards-Helaire
with upside from there.
And if either of them goes top 10 this year in terms of finishes, they're probably in the top 3 or 4 at the position next year. I mean, that's the upside that they have. And so I don't, even if you're rebuilding and you're in a situation like this, don't take a discount in terms of selling it off so I can get more rookie picks. Get good players and figure out other ways to do it, whether that is shift off of other players, right? Trade existing veterans, force them 4 extra picks. You can do that. You can go that route, but you don't want to give away an elite asset because you think I need more bullets to fire, especially in this class. I'll say with the solace of that, you can with some of the receivers, you have 203. Like, you can make this is a class where you can make, if you can make 108, 203, and 301 work. But that's not the type of trade that you want to do in this particular situation.
It's uphill.
Yes.
The odds are not in your favor. 108, 203, and 301. Could you get a top 15 to 20 dynasty asset in the next 12 to 24 months from those spots? Yes, you could. Is it way more likely from 101? Yes. So, and here's the other thing. It's a deeper lineup. I did mention that it's 1-2-3-1 with 2 flexes going through quarterback through tight end at the skill positions, but still, it is hard to find and replicate cornerstone players. And 101 in a strong class has a good chance to be that. So you still need those cornerstone aspects. And of course, we could give recommendations for those other picks. And yes, it could work out. But here's the problem is that this is why, if you come upon a team that it's like, well, I got Saquon Barkley and one other piece, and that's about it. Going about the trading is very careful. Like you can pivot to another cornerstone player and be patient, work the right deal. Because 101, until you make the pick, and heck, even if you make the pick, you still have oodles of time to make a deal. And my final point would be this, that so in addition to getting a cornerstone player, now staying within the top 4 or 5, getting one of those other top running backs this year is staying in the ballpark, is staying in the neighborhood of getting a good shot to get a cornerstone player. Now you venture to 8. Now you're talking about potentially wide receiver 3 of the class. Maybe that's, it's probably going to be that in a PPR league. You're going to be looking as the best player on the board is a wide receiver at that spot. And that's fine. But you said you're weak at running back. So even if you were thinking positional need, which we don't do, you're still looking at maybe running back being at 203 or 301, not really at 108, because one of those 5 running backs has not been falling to that range. So you want cornerstone players. And if you trade down, again, you can massage it and trade to 103, 104. Can you get maybe a first next year plus a second this year to do that? I think that's within the scope of outcomes. And the other thing Jordan and I always say is shop to more of the league than most people do. So you don't have to advertise it. Please don't update your trade bait because that doesn't do anything. That says come ask for a steep discount on whatever is listed on this page. Why wouldn't they? You're listing them as available. Please walk out the door. Please don't be on my Dynasty team anymore. So don't do it that way. You have to legitimately sit down with your phone, with your computer, and send offers. The only way is to door to door. You got to knock on doors. Don't use the group me chat. Don't use the message board. Don't message people. Send offers. What do you want for 101? And if you're willing to accept additional pieces to 102, 103, 104, and 105, send those offers. You don't know. Be aggressive. You are the belle of the ball, the pretty girl at the dance, and you can go to them. That's fine. But just know that you have suitors. You have what they want. I always say when you're on the clock in a dynasty league, startup, rookie draft, or otherwise, you hold the cards. Don't pretend like you have to pick in 4 seconds. Make trade offers. Be aggressive. What do I want? How far do I want to move down? To me, 8 was too far. And ask for more. You can always counter and say, well, in your mind's eye, what is going to be the worst case scenario? What's the least I'll accept? But don't start there. That's go for it.
Yeah, and it'll never be worth more, that pick, than when you're sitting on the clock, right? If there's discussions leading up to the draft, once you get to that second where it says 101 is on the clock, the draft has started, that's when the pick is worth the most. That pick will be worth, because if someone wants it, they need to do it. That goes with any pick. So yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, I would sort of echo what you would say. And you want to stay inside. For me, I would want to stay inside the line at running back and do that a little bit different way. And plus the difference, like the 101, that can be 2 warp, 2 wins over replacement. And the first 3 years, that's totally reasonable expectation. And, you're adding 2 wins to your team in the first 3 years of that player's career. That helps you at running back right there. That's a big difference in terms of your record.
Subscribe, rate, and review the Football Guys family of shows, including this one, the Audible, On the Couch, all the shows you know and love, Redraft, Dynasty, there's DFS, a number of channels through your listening devices. You can sign up for the Football Guys daily email update at footballguys.com/free and sign up for the FFPC Football Guys Players Championship. With a sign up, you get a free $35 team just for registering. And there are drafts going on now. You can also select your draft date in the future. That link is myffpc.myffpc/footballguys. This episode, we discussed Jameis Winston, Lamar Jackson, Aaron Rodgers, plus dynasty trading specific to rookie draft strategy. I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your dynasty leagues.